In the high-stakes, multi-dimensional game of naval chess that defines the 2020s, the world has become accustomed to a certain rhythm of escalation. For years, the global spotlight has been firmly fixed on the Chengdu J-20 Mighty Dragon and the carrier-capable Shenyang J-35. These aircraft were seen as the dual pillars of China's aerial ambition, one a heavyweight air dominance fighter, the other a versatile multi-role specialist designed to challenge the F-35. But as we navigate the complexities of 2026, a new and far more ominous shadow has appeared from the depths of the Shenyang Aircraft Corporation. While international analysts were busy debating the engine thrust of the J-20 or the stealth coatings of the J-35, a secretive project was maturing in the darkness of northeast China. This is not just another fighter, and it is not merely an incremental upgrade to an existing airframe. This is the J-50, known in whispered intelligence circles as the White Shark. It is a machine that appears to have been engineered with a singular, terrifying purpose: to hunt and destroy the crown jewels of American power projection, the United States Navy's carrier strike groups. The emergence of the J-50 marks a pivotal moment in military history, signaling that the era of China being a fast follower is over. They are no longer just building counterparts to American jets. They are building a stealth monster that has no direct equivalent in the Western inventory. The context of this development is rooted in a fundamental strategic problem that has haunted Chinese military planners since the 1990s. For over 80 years, the United States has used its supercarriers as floating sovereign territory, moving them with impunity across the world's oceans to enforce its will. During the 1990s, China watched helplessly as American carrier groups sailed through the Taiwan Strait, realizing they had no way to touch these steel giants. Since then, Beijing has invested billions into anti-access and area denial weapons, from long-range ballistic missiles to silent diesel-electric submarines. But missiles can be intercepted, and submarines are slow. What they truly needed was a platform that combined the speed and invisibility of a stealth fighter with the heavy-hitting payload of a long-range bomber. While the world looked at the J-20 as the primary threat, Shenyang was quietly working on the J-50 to bridge this critical gap. The White Shark is the realization of that long-term dream, a platform designed to penetrate the most sophisticated air defenses in the world and deliver a fatal blow to the heart of the 7th Fleet. Defining the J-50 requires us to throw away the traditional labels of 20th century aviation. It is not a fighter in the sense that it is meant to engage in dogfights over a battlefield, nor is it a bomber in the sense of a slow, massive airframe like the B-52. Instead, the J-50 is a heavyweight, multi-role stealth platform that represents a new category of maritime strike interceptor. It is significantly larger than the J-20, with a reinforced airframe designed to handle the immense stresses of high-speed, low-altitude flight over the rough waters of the Pacific. By bridging the gap between a fighter and a long-range bomber, the J-50 solves the reach problem that has always limited land-based aviation. It is a machine with the internal fuel capacity to fly thousands of miles without the need for vulnerable tankers, and the internal volume to carry the largest anti-ship missiles ever fitted to a stealth aircraft. In the naval chess game of 2026, the J-50 is the queen, a piece that can move across the entire board with devastating speed and strike from any direction. The name White Shark is more than just a catchy moniker. It is a reflection of the aircraft's predatory mission profile. Just as a shark hunts in silence from the deep, the J-50 is designed to cruise in total electronic silence, using its advanced passive sensors to find the heat signatures and electronic emissions of an American carrier group. The secret of Shenyang lies in how they have integrated all aspects stealth into such a massive airframe. Most stealth fighters are designed to be invisible, primarily from the front, but the J-50 utilizes a revolutionary blended wing body design and a specialized V-tail configuration that minimizes its radar cross-section from the sides and the rear. This is a critical requirement for hunting carriers, which are always protected by a 360-degree umbrella of radar coverage from E-2D Hawkeye aircraft and Aegis-equipped destroyers. The J-50 is built to slip through the gaps in that umbrella, closing the distance until it is within range to launch its hypersonic payload. Furthermore, the J-50 represents a massive industrial victory for the Shenyang Aircraft Corporation. For years, Shenyang was seen as the second-tier manufacturer compared to Chengdu, primarily known for building licensed versions of Russian designs. But with the J-50, Shenyang has asserted itself as the leader in heavy stealth technology. They have incorporated lessons learned from the FC-31 project and the J-15 Carrier fighter to create a jet that is rugged, reliable, and technologically superior to anything they have produced before. The intelligence reports emerging in 2026 suggest that the J-50 utilizes a high percentage of advanced carbon fiber composites and 3D-printed titanium structures, allowing it to maintain a massive size while keeping its weight low enough for extreme performance. This is the stealth monster that the Pentagon feared, a Chinese jet that is not a clone, not a copy, but an original solution to a specific strategic problem. As we begin this deep dive into the White Shark, we must recognize that its emergence has effectively ended the era of American naval sanctuary. For the last 8 decades, A.U.S. Carrier was considered a safe base of operations, a fortress that could not be reached by enemy aircraft. The J-50 changes that forever. It is a machine that brings the fight to the carrier, forcing American commanders to operate in a state of constant, high-tension vigilance. The J-50 doesn't need to win a war on its own. It only needs to exist to change the behavior of the U.S. Navy. By creating a credible threat to the supercarrier, China has forced the United States to rethink its entire Pacific strategy, shifting from a posture of confident presence to one of cautious defense. This is the predator that has emerged from the shadows, a silent, heavy-hitting ghost that marks the beginning of a new and far more dangerous chapter in the history of the Pacific. To understand how the White Shark achieves this level of terror, we must look closer at its anatomy, the revolutionary aerodynamics, and the hidden weapon bays that make it the ultimate maritime hunter. To understand why the sheer existence of the Shenyang J-50 has sent tremors through the naval intelligence community, we must look past the headlines and strip the machine down to its bare metal bones. When military analysts first laid eyes on the blurry satellite imagery of the prototype taxiing on a runway in northeast China, the immediate reaction was not one of comparison, but of shock at the sheer scale of the ambition on display. This is not a compact fighter designed to dance in a dogfight. It is a leviathan of the skies, a machine that has earned the moniker White Shark, not just for its rumored pale naval camouflage, but for its predatory silhouette and its dominance at the top of the food chain. The anatomy of the J-50 is a masterclass in modern aerospace engineering, representing a departure from the angular, jagged aesthetic of the 5th generation into something far more fluid, organic, and terrifyingly efficient. The design analysis begins with the sheer size of the airframe. The J-50 is estimated to be significantly longer and heavier than the Chengdu J-20, pushing it into a weight class that straddles the line between a heavy interceptor and a medium bomber. This massive, reinforced airframe is a direct response to the brutal physics of the Pacific theater. Unlike land-based fighters that operate from comfortable airfields, the J-50 is engineered for the high humidity, high salinity, and high turbulence environment of maritime operations. Its fuselage utilizes a sleek, blended wing-body configuration, where the distinction between the wings and the main body blurs into a single, continuous lifting surface. This design choice serves 2 critical purposes. First, it generates an enormous amount of lift, allowing the White Shark to loiter at high altitudes for hours while carrying a heavy fuel load. Second, and perhaps more importantly, it eliminates the sharp corners and right angles that traditional radar systems love to latch onto. When a radar wave hits the smooth, curving slope of the J-50's fuselage, it doesn't bounce back to the receiver. It flows over the skin like water over a stone, dissipating harmlessly into the ether. The most striking visual feature of this anatomy, however, is the complete removal of the traditional vertical stabilizers in favor of a widely canted V-tail configuration, or in some rumored iterations, a near-tailless design heavily reliant on active flow control. In traditional fighter jets, the vertical tail is a massive billboard for enemy radar, especially when viewed from the side. By flattening the tail into a shallow V-shape, Shenyang engineers have dramatically reduced the aircraft's side-profile radar cross-section. This optimization is crucial for maritime warfare. When flying against a U.S. carrier strike group, the threat doesn't just come from the front. It comes from the E-2D Hawkeye radar planes orbiting hundreds of miles away, scanning from every conceivable angle. The V-tail ensures that even if the J-50 is flanking the fleet, it remains nothing more than a ghost on the screen, a fleeting anomaly that disappears before a fire control solution can be established. But geometry is only half of the stealth equation. The true genius and the true danger of the J-50 lies in its skin. For decades, the Achilles heel of stealth aircraft has been the maintenance of their radar-absorbent coatings. The early stealth jets of the 1990s and 2000s were notorious for their fragile skins, which would peel and degrade when exposed to rain or humidity. The Pacific Ocean is the harshest environment on Earth for these delicate materials. The salt spray acts like a corrosive acid that eats away at radar-absorbing paints. Shenyang has reportedly solved this problem with the development of advanced metamaterial coatings. Unlike traditional iron ball paint, which absorbs radar waves through simple dissipation, metamaterials are engineered structures with microscopic patterns that bend electromagnetic waves around the object. This smart skin is not only more effective against the low-frequency search radars used by the Aegis combat system, but it is also chemically hardened to resist the corrosive bite of the salt air. This means the J-50 can operate from island bases in the South China Sea or forward deploy to coastal airfields without losing its stealth properties after a single mission. It is an all-weather predator, capable of hunting in the typhoons and storms that would ground lesser aircraft. Yet, even the most invisible aircraft is useless if it cannot strike with lethal force. This brings us to the defining feature of the White Shark's anatomy: the internal weapon bays. In the world of stealth, if you hang a missile on the outside of the wing, you ruin the aerodynamics and destroy the stealth profile immediately. Therefore, everything must be carried inside. The F-22 and F-35 are limited by relatively shallow weapon bays designed for air-to-air missiles or small precision bombs. The J-50, however, was built around what analysts are calling the Goliath bays. Located along the center line of the vast fuselage, these cavernous compartments are deep enough and long enough to house the most dangerous weapon in the Chinese arsenal: the YJ-21 hypersonic anti-ship ballistic missile. This capability changes the strategic calculus entirely. The YJ-21 is a weapon that flies at speeds exceeding Mach 6, plunging down on its target with kinetic energy that can crack the hull of a supercarrier in a single hit. Until now, such missiles had to be launched from heavy bombers or destroyers, which are easily detected. The J-50 creates a nightmare scenario: a stealth platform that can sneak within 1,000 miles of a carrier group undetected, open its Goliath bays, and release a hypersonic killer before the American defenses even know they are under attack. The engineering required to fit such a massive weapon inside a stealth airframe is monumental. It requires a complex system of hydraulic doors and ejection mechanisms that can punch a 4-ton missile through the turbulent airflow of supersonic flight without destabilizing the aircraft. The sheer volume of the J-50 implies that it is not just a sniper, but a heavy hitter, capable of carrying a payload that was once the exclusive domain of strategic bombers. The combination of the reinforced, blended-wing airframe, the corrosion-resistant metamaterial skin, and the Goliath internal bays creates a machine that is uniquely adapted to the tyranny of the Pacific. It addresses the specific weaknesses of previous generations' range, payload, and environmental durability while maximizing the lethality of China's missile technology. The White Shark is not designed to be a jack-of-all-trades. It is a specialized tool, a hammer forged specifically to shatter the shield of the United States Navy. When American naval commanders look at the specifications of the J-50, they do not see a rival fighter. They see a platform that invalidates the defensive architecture they have spent 50 years building. The anatomy of the J-50 proves that Shenyang has moved beyond the phase of imitation and into the phase of asymmetrical innovation. They have built a monster that can live in the salt, hide in the open, and carry a spear big enough to sink a floating city. As we peel back the skin of this predator, the question is no longer whether it can fly, but how exactly it plans to execute its deadly mission. This leads us to the doctrinal shift that the J-50 enables a strategy of one-hit kills that threatens to turn the vast Pacific into a graveyard for the old guard. To fully grasp the terror that the Shenyang J-50 inspires within the Pentagon, one must look beyond the gleaming metal of its fuselage and understand the cold, calculating philosophy that dictates its existence. This is the domain of doctrine, the invisible rulebook of war that decides how battles are fought and won. For the better part of a century, the primary mission of a fighter jet was air superiority to clear the skies of enemy planes so that bombers could do their work. But the mission profile of the J-50 White Shark is fundamentally different. It is not built to wrestle with American F-22 Raptors or F-35 Lightning IIs in a swirling dogfight. In the eyes of Chinese strategists, engaging in air-to-air combat is a distraction, a waste of resources and time. The J-50 has a far more singular and devastating purpose. It is the ultimate anti-access weapon, a platform designed to ignore the pawns and go straight for the king. In the vast chessboard of the Pacific, the king is the United States Navy supercarrier. The doctrine of the J-50 is built on a chillingly simple premise. If you sink the runway, you do not need to fight the planes. This philosophy represents the evolution of China's anti-access and area denial strategy, often referred to as A2AD. In the early 2000s, this strategy relied heavily on land-based ballistic missiles like the DF-21D. While these missiles were formidable, they were static. They could be tracked by satellites, and their range was fixed. The J-50 transforms this static threat into a mobile, invisible nightmare. By mounting a hypersonic anti-ship capability onto a stealth platform with a combat radius exceeding 1,000 miles, China has effectively created a sniper rifle that can move. The J-50 is designed to penetrate the outer defensive layers of a carrier strike group, the picket line of destroyers and radar planes, without triggering an alarm. Its mission is not to be seen, not to communicate, and not to engage until it reaches the optimal firing solution. It is a ghost designed to deliver a hammer blow. The operational reality of this doctrine is what keeps American admirals awake at night. It revolves around what military planners call the one-hit strategy. Modern naval warfare is a game of reaction times. An American Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, equipped with the Aegis combat system, is a formidable shield, capable of tracking and intercepting hundreds of targets simultaneously. However, this system relies on the ability to detect a threat early enough to launch an interceptor missile. The J-50 is engineered to compress that reaction window from minutes down to mere seconds. In a typical engagement scenario, a flight of J-50s would approach the carrier group at high altitude, using their passive sensors to triangulate the fleet's position while remaining electronically silent. Their all-aspect stealth and metamaterial coatings would allow them to slip inside the radar horizon of the American fleet, getting far closer than any non-stealth aircraft could ever hope to survive. Once inside this lethal radius, the J-50 executes the one-hit strike. The bay doors snap open, and the YJ-21 hypersonic missile is released. Within seconds, the missile ignites and accelerates to speeds exceeding Mach 6, climbing into the stratosphere before diving vertically onto the target. The coordination here is critical. The J-50 does not need to guide the missile all the way to impact. It simply needs to get the weapon close enough for the missile's own seekers to acquire the massive radar signature of a 100,000-ton aircraft carrier. Because the launch platform was stealthy, the American fleet receives no early warning of the launch. They do not see the J-50 coming. The first indication of an attack is the sudden appearance of a hypersonic warhead on their radar screens, screaming down from the upper atmosphere at a mile per second. At that speed and that range, the defensive systems of the carrier group are overwhelmed. The physics of the engagement dictate that even if the carrier's close-in weapon systems manage to hit the incoming missile, the kinetic energy of the debris alone would be enough to mission-kill the vessel. The one-hit strategy relies on the fact that you do not need to sink a carrier to win. You only need to damage its flight deck enough to prevent aircraft from launching or recovering. In that moment, the most powerful warship in history becomes a floating steel coffin. The strategic consequence of this mission profile is the establishment of total maritime dominance through the concept of the keep-out zone. The mere existence of the J-50 forces the United States. Seventh, fleet to operate differently. For 80 years, American power projection relied on the ability to park a carrier strike group just off the coast of a conflict zone. But if the J-50 can threaten that carrier from 1,500 miles away, the U.S. Navy is forced to retreat. They must push their operating boxes back to the relative safety of the Central Pacific, far away from the Taiwan Strait or the South China Sea. This retreat creates a vacuum. If the American carriers are forced to stay 2,000 miles away from the Chinese coast to avoid the White Shark, their own F-35C fighters, which have a combat radius of only about 600 to 700 miles, become tactically irrelevant. They simply cannot reach the fight. This is the genius of the J-50's doctrine. It uses the tyranny of distance against the United States. By outranging the American air wing, the J-50 creates a buffer zone where the Chinese Navy can operate with impunity. It neutralizes the air power of the United States without ever having to shoot down a single American jet. The J-50 effectively creates a wall in the sky, a line in the ocean that the West cannot cross without risking catastrophic loss. This mission profile turns the Pacific Ocean into a trap. It lures the enemy into thinking they are safe, only to reveal that the hunter has been circling them the entire time. Furthermore, this doctrine implies a shift in pilot training and mentality. The pilots of the J-50 are not being trained as knights of the air looking for glory in single combat. They are being trained as system managers and executioners. Their job is cold, mathematical, and precise. They are taught to trust their stealth, to trust their sensors, and to execute the launch sequence with the detachment of a submarine commander. The coordination required to synchronize a strike from multiple J-50s, approaching from different vectors to overwhelm a carrier's defenses, requires a level of network integration that China has spent the last decade perfecting. The J-50 is the physical embodiment of a strategy that says, "We do not accept your control of the seas." It is a weapon built to break the psychological invincibility of the United States Navy. When a carrier group commander knows that a white shark could be lurking in the clouds, invisible and armed with a hypersonic ship killer, every decision becomes paralyzed by caution. That hesitation is exactly what Beijing wants. The Carrier-Killer Doctrine is not just about sinking ships. It is about sinking the confidence of an adversary. It is about proving that the old ways of war are dead, and that in the vast, unforgiving expanse of the Pacific, the predator with the biggest teeth and the quietest fins is the one who rules the water. As the J-50 patrols the edge of the atmosphere, it signals the end of the era where the ocean was an American lake. The white shark has claimed its territory, and the cost of entering it has just become unacceptably high. To achieve this level of dominance, however, requires more than just a doctrine. It requires a technological heart capable of powering such a beast. This leads us to the internal machinery of the monster, the engines and sensors that allow the white shark to see, fly, and kill with such impunity. In the anatomy of any apex predator, the lethal capabilities of its claws and teeth are meaningless without a heart powerful enough to drive the hunt and eyes sharp enough to pierce the darkness. As we dissect the Shenyang J-50 white shark, we move from its terrifying exterior into the technological inferno that burns within its fuselage. This is the heart of the monster, a fusion of raw thermodynamic violence and cold, quantum precision that separates the J-50 from every other aircraft that has ever flown under the flag of the People's Liberation Army. For decades, the Achilles heel of Chinese aviation was the engine. They could build sleek airframes, But they struggled to build the hearts required to power them, often relying on imported Russian technology that lagged a generation behind the West. But the J-50 represents the end of that dependency. It is built around a propulsion system that provides the raw, unadulterated thrust needed to turn a heavy maritime strike platform into a supersonic juggernaut. The motive force behind the White Shark is believed to be the integration of twin WS-15MA engines, or potentially the even more advanced variable cycle WS-19. These are not merely engines, they are miracles of metallurgy and physics. To understand why this specific propulsion system is critical, we must remember the mission profile. The J-50 is designed to carry the massive YJ-21 hypersonic missile internally. This adds significant weight. In a traditional aircraft, carrying such a heavy load would turn the jet into a sluggish, subsonic truck, vulnerable to interception. But the WS-15 is designed to generate over 40,000 pounds of thrust per engine, equipped with single crystal turbine blades capable of withstanding temperatures that would melt lesser metals. This immense power allows the J-50 to achieve supercruise, the ability to fly at supersonic speeds without using its afterburners. Supercruise is the strategic game-changer for the Pacific theater. An aircraft using afterburners consumes fuel at an exponential rate, drastically reducing its range. But with the WS-15, the J-50 can sprint across the vast distances of the South China Sea at Mach 1.5 or higher, while still sipping fuel efficiently enough to return home. This speed dictates the engagement. It means the J-50 can impart a massive kinetic energy boost to its missiles at the moment of launch, extending their range even further. It means the aircraft can dash into the launch zone, release its weapon, and turn to escape before the enemy's defensive interceptors can close the distance. The roar of these engines is the sound of a heavyweight fighter defying the laws of drag and gravity, proving that China has finally mastered the most difficult component of modern aviation. But if the engines provide the muscle, the sensors provide the vision. And it is here that the J-50 moves from the realm of engineering into the realm of science fiction. The most terrifying rumor surrounding the White Shark is the integration of quantum radar technology. For the last 30 years, stealth has been a game of geometry and materials, designed to deflect and absorb traditional radio waves. The American F-35 and F-22 are built to be invisible to these radio frequencies. However, quantum radar operates on a completely different principle. It relies on the physics of quantum entanglement, generating pairs of photons where one particle is transmitted out and the other is kept within the system. When the transmitted photon hits an object, even a stealthy object like an F-35, it changes the state of its entangled partner back at the radar station. This interaction allows the radar to detect the presence of an aircraft not by listening for a reflection, but by detecting the disturbance in the background noise of the universe. If the J-50 is indeed equipped with a functional quantum radar suite, it renders the billions of dollars spent on American stealth shaping effectively obsolete. It would strip the F-35 of its cloak of invisibility, allowing the J-50 to detect American fighters from hundreds of miles away. This quantum vision creates a first-look, first-shot advantage that overturns the entire premise of fifth-generation warfare. Even if the technology is not fully quantum, reports suggest the J-50 carries a distributed aperture system of infrared sensors far more sensitive than Western equivalents. These sensors look for heat, not radar returns. In the cold vacuum of the upper atmosphere, the heat plume of an F-35 engine stands out like a flare. By combining quantum theory with advanced thermal imaging, the J-50 is designed to see the enemy before the enemy even knows the hunt has begun. It is capable of detecting a carrier air wing while it is still forming up on the flight deck, turning the hunter into the hunted before the wheels even leave the runway. Yet, the J-50 is more than just a shooter. It is a node in a vast digital kill web. This brings us to the final aspect of its internal anatomy: digital integration. In the modern era, no jet flies alone. The J-50 serves as a maritime command hub, a flying quarterback that synthesizes data from every domain of warfare. As it cruises in the stratosphere, its onboard computers are constantly linking with high-orbit surveillance satellites to track the movement of carrier groups in real time. Simultaneously, it is communicating via secure, high-bandwidth data links with unmanned underwater vehicles, drone submarines that are tracking the acoustic signatures of the American fleet from below. This creates a total domain picture. The pilot of the J-50 does not just see what his own radar sees, he sees what the satellite sees, what the submarine hears, and what the land-based radar detects. The cockpit of the White Shark is a fusion of all this information, displayed on a panoramic screen that filters out the noise and highlights the targets. This integration allows the J-50 to execute blind launches, where it fires a missile at a target it cannot physically see, relying on targeting data fed to it by a drone hundreds of miles away. It allows for complex ambush tactics, where the J-50 acts as the bait to lure American fighters into a trap set by surface-to-air missile batteries on Chinese-held islands. This digital nervous system is what makes the J-50 truly dangerous. It is not just a single aircraft. It is the tip of an informational spear, the focal point where the entire military might of China converges on a single set of coordinates. The heart of the monster is a combination of brute force and terrifying intelligence. The integration of the WS-15 or WS-19 engines gives it the kinetic energy to dominate the physical space of the Pacific, while the rumored quantum sensors and digital data links allow it to dominate the electromagnetic spectrum. It is a machine designed to fly faster, see deeper, and think quicker than its adversaries. For the pilots of the U.S. Navy, the realization is chilling. They are facing a platform that may be able to see through their stealth, outrun their interceptors, and coordinate a strike from multiple dimensions simultaneously. The White Shark is not just a predator of the ocean, it is a master of the ether, a technological beast that beats with a heart of fire and sees with eyes of quantum light. This technological supremacy sets the stage for the final strategic verdict, a realization that the introduction of such a machine does not just change the tactics of a battle, but the outcome of a war. As we arrive at the final strategic verdict of this deep dive, the silhouette of the Shenyang J-50 casts a shadow that stretches far beyond the runway of an airfield or the deck of a ship. It stretches across the entirety of geopolitical history, darkening the assumptions that have underpinned global stability for the better part of a century. We are staring into the face of a strategic nightmare, a scenario that Western military planners have dreaded since the end of the Cold War but hoped would never actually materialize. To understand the gravity of the J-50, we must understand the era it threatens to destroy. For over 80 years, since the decisive naval battles of the 1940s, the United States Navy has operated under a doctrine of absolute impunity. The aircraft carrier was not just a weapon of war. It was a symbol of American exceptionalism. 90,000 tons of floating sovereign territory that could park off the coast of any nation on Earth and dictate the terms of engagement. It was the ultimate tool of diplomacy, a big stick that required no words to convey a message. But the arrival of the J-50 White Shark in 2026 signals the abrupt and violent end of that era. The ocean is no longer a sanctuary, and the carrier is no longer a king. It is a target. The power shift represented by the J-50 is psychological as much as it is physical. The existence of a stealth platform capable of launching hypersonic strikes from beyond the defensive horizon introduces a level of risk that is politically unacceptable for Washington. In the past, an American president could order a carrier strike group to the Taiwan Strait or the South China Sea as a show of force, confident that the ships were invulnerable to anything but a full-scale nuclear war. The J-50 changes that calculus. If a single White Shark can slip through the defensive net and deliver a crippling blow to a carrier, risking the lives of 5,000 sailors and the loss of a $13 billion asset, the cost of intervention becomes paralyzingly high. This creates a decoupling effect. The J-50 effectively pushes the United States Navy back to the second island chain, forcing them to operate from a distance where their influence is diluted and their reaction times are slowed. It turns the anti-access strategy from a theory into a physical reality, effectively locking the doors to the Western Pacific and handing the keys to Beijing. However, the Pentagon is not watching this shift in silence. The emergence of the J-50 has triggered a frantic, high-speed scramble within the United States Defense Industrial Base, a desperate race to find a shield that can stop the new spear. This counter-response is centered on the rapid deployment of directed energy weapons and advanced electronic warfare suites. Realizing that traditional interceptor missiles may be too slow or too expensive to stop a hypersonic barrage launched from a stealth platform, the U.S. Navy is betting its future on lasers. Systems like the HEL-IOS, or high-energy laser with integrated optical dazzler and surveillance, are being rushed onto the decks of Arleigh Burke-class destroyers. The logic is simple. Against a missile moving at Mach 6, the only defense is a weapon that strikes at the speed of light. The Pentagon hopes that these lasers can blind the sensors of the J-50 or burn through the casing of the incoming YJ-21 missiles before they impact. Simultaneously, the United States is pouring billions into the next generation of electronic warfare, specifically the Surface Electronic Warfare Improvement Program. The goal is to create a wall of noise so dense and so complex that the J-50's sensors are jammed or deceived before it can even find the fleet. This is the new arms race of the 2020s, a battle between the stealth and speed of the Chinese White Shark and the raw wattage and processing power of American defensive grids. Yet, critics argue that this response is reactive, not proactive. Lasers struggle in the heavy rain and fog of the Pacific conditions the J-50 is specifically designed to endure. Electronic warfare relies on knowing the enemy's frequency, but the J-50's quantum or advanced AESA radars are designed to be undetectable. The United States is scrambling to patch the holes in a defensive architecture that was built for a different time, fighting a threat that was designed specifically to exploit those very holes. This leads us to the final verdict, the inescapable conclusion that history will likely draw when looking back at the mid-2020s. Is the White Shark the final nail in the coffin for traditional naval power? The answer is a terrifying yes, but with a nuance. The J-50 does not mean that navies will cease to exist, but it means the age of the capital ship is over. Just as the aircraft carrier replaced the battleship after the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor proved that big guns were useless against air power, the J-50 proves that big, expensive surface ships are useless against stealthy, hypersonic air power. The J-50 is the system disruptor that forces a total evolution. It dictates that the future of naval warfare does not belong to the massive supercarrier, but to distributed, unmanned, and submersible systems that are harder to find and cheaper to lose. The J-50 has rewritten the rules of the ocean by proving that offensive capability has finally outpaced defensive technology. For decades, the defense had the advantage. The Aegis system could track and kill almost anything that flew. But with the combination of the J-50's invisibility and the YJ-21's hypersonic speed, the offense has reclaimed the throne. It is now easier and cheaper for China to build a J-50 than it is for the United States to build a defense against it. This cost asymmetry is the true strategic nightmare. China can afford to build hundreds of White Sharks for the price of a single Ford-class aircraft carrier. They can saturate the sky with threats, knowing that the United States cannot possibly defend against them all. As we stand on the precipice of this new era, the Shenyang J-50 serves as a grim monument to the changing world order. It is a machine that demands respect, not just for its engineering, but for the strategic vision it represents. It is the end of complacency. It is the end of the assumption that the West owns the sky and the sea. The White Shark is out there, patrolling the edge of the atmosphere, a silent sentinel that has drawn a line in the water that cannot be crossed. The diplomatic weight of an American carrier group, once the most powerful force in human history, has been neutralized by a ghost in the machine. The game has changed. The pieces have moved. And in the cold, dark waters of the Pacific, the United States Navy is waking up to the realization that for the first time in 80 years, they are no longer the hunters. They are the prey. The era of the white shark has begun, and the silence it brings to the ocean is louder than any explosion.